Hello and welcome to Hard Copy on Channels Television. I'm Kayla Megwa. The many constantly moving parts of the conflict in the Middle East is not lost on us, but we'll try to keep up as much as we can on tonight's episode. Since our last conversation with my guest, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a deadly 12-day war that kicked off on the 13th of June 2025 against Iran, while Iran launched Operation True Promise 3 against Israel. Casualties have run into thousands, while hundreds of people have died, mostly from the Iranian side. Now, the history between Israel and Iran goes back to biblical times. In the 6th century BC, the Persian king, Cyrus the Great, is credited with enabling the Jews to return to Jerusalem to rebuild their temple. And other Persian kings like Darius and Artaxerxes ruled over well-established and even influential Jewish communities in Persia. The biblical books of Isaiah, Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, Chronicles, and Esther contain references to the life and experiences of Jews in Persia. But that relationship has soured over the years, cordial during the Cold War and then openly hostile by the end of the Gulf War. The Nizam, Iran's current government, does not recognize the legitimacy of the State of Israel and has called for its destruction, insisting that Palestine is the legitimate government of the historic Palestinian territories. Israel, on its part, considers Iran, with its nuclear ambitions, a threat to the Middle East stability and has targeted Iranian assets in assassinations and airstrikes over the years. Now, that's the background. So what happened on the 13th of June this year that led to this speech by Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Israel's fight is not with you. It's not with you, the brave people of Iran, whom we respect and admire. Our fight is with our common enemy, a murderous regime that both oppresses you and impoverishes you. Brave people of Iran, your light will defeat the darkness. I'm with you. The people of Israel are with you.
We have been inundated with the accusations of Iran being a nuclear threat. Well, Israel itself is said to have around 90 nuclear warheads, allegedly, as do about 8 other countries, including the United States, France, the United Kingdom, and even India. So why is it so against Iran's nuclear program? An Iran nuclear deal with the United States was in the works. Remember, the United States and Iran had talks in Oman and Rome, 5 engagements in total. But the sticky issue remained Iran's insistence that it has the right to enrich uranium. And a round of talks were slated for mid-June this year, and then boom! On June the 13th, Israel struck Iran. Tonight, we ask why. June the 22nd, the United States jumps in, striking several key Iranian nuclear facilities, including Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. U.S. President Donald Trump warned that the United States will go after additional targets if Iran does not, quote, make peace. Enter the Kremlin. Russia's Vladimir Putin vows to support the Iranians, calling the attack, quote, absolutely unprovoked aggression against Iran. We have had long, good, and reliable relations with Iran from our side. We will undertake efforts to support the Iranian people, end quote. A day after, a ceasefire is called by the United States President Donald Trump, confirmed by both Iran and Israel. But something went wrong, leading to this outburst by President Trump on his way to the NATO summit at The Hague.
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I'd never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either.
Where do things stand now? And what does peace mean? Well, my guest tonight, Ambassador Michael Freeman, Israel's ambassador to Nigeria, shares the Israeli perspective on this very dicey matter. Ambassador Michael Freeman, welcome again to Hard Copy.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, so let's talk about the two countries right now. Where do things stand between Israel and Iran? We hear a peace deal is in place. It's a fragile one. Where do things stand?
Well, as you mentioned in your introduction, Iran, the Iranian regime, is a regime that is dedicated to the destruction of the state of Israel. Its stated goal is death to America, death to Israel. Even after this ceasefire came into effect, we saw the Iranian parliament chanting in unison, death to America, death to Israel. And we've seen over the last number of years that Iran has been building a nuclear weapon, moving towards a nuclear weapon, and therefore Israel acted in order to prevent Iran from obtaining the ultimate weapon which it intended to use to carry out its threat to destroy the state of Israel. And we acted, as any country in the world would, to prevent a country that is determined to destroy us from obtaining the weaponry to do so.
I mean, it is a very dicey situation, especially when we look at the fact that Israel is in the middle of a lot of the conflict going on there. Does that ring true? Maybe is that something that the Israeli government thinks about, the fact that you're constantly at war? Some people have said that, contrary to thinking that other people may be the cause of instability in the Middle East, that Israel might actually be the agitator. What do you make of this assertion?
Any look at the reality would tell you that Israel here is the victim. Israel is being attacked on 7 different fronts since the 7th of October. On the 7th of October, we know that Hamas, the Islamist terror organization from Gaza, launched an attack across the border, sending thousands of terrorists across the border, murdering, raping, kidnapping, burning alive, torturing whole families, men, women, and children. They kidnapped babies, they kidnapped children, they kidnapped people from within their beds. And when Hamas did this, they were backed and sponsored by Iran. A couple of days later, Hezbollah from Lebanon also joined in, again sponsored and backed by Iran. Then we saw the Houthis joining in, sponsored and backed by Iran. We saw radical terror groups in the West Bank, backed and sponsored by Iran. We saw groups from within Syria and from Iraq, backed and sponsored by Iran, and then Iran itself attacking Israel. All of this was backed and sponsored by Iran. And if you want to understand where instability comes from, where terrorism comes from, it comes from the head of the octopus, from the head of the snake, and that is Iran. And that is why we acted as we did, precisely because we've been under attack on so many different fronts, sponsored by Iran, and Iran was moving towards getting a nuclear weapon, was in a position to imminently have a nuclear weapon, and therefore we carried out this preemptive strike in order to secure the future of the state of Israel and the Jewish people.
Let's come closer. What happened on June the 13th? What necessitated that attack between Israel and Iran on June the 13th this year?
Well, this was a preemptive strike. It was a preemptive strike by Israel as Iran was imminently about to obtain nuclear weapons. It was moving forward in a program, a covert program. The International Atomic Energy Agency had recently declared that Iran was in breach of the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, that it was clearly moving towards nuclear weapon. Iran had enriched over 200 kilos of uranium to over 60% enrichment. There is no civilian purpose or civilian justification for enrichment of uranium above 4%. So they'd already enriched to 60%. And we're on the way to enriching to 90%. Well, the assessment was that Iran was very close to having between 9 and 15 nuclear weapons. In addition, they had a ballistic missile program which would allow them to deliver those nuclear weapons into Israel. And therefore, we acted in order to remove an imminent and existential threat to the state of Israel. And we did so by attacking the ballistic missile program and the nuclear weapons program. This was a country and is a country that stated aim is the destruction of the state of Israel, is the stated aim the destruction of all of the people within Israel. It was presenting a real threat both to Israel and the Jewish people, and we acted to prevent imminent threat.
We hear that. I want to be able to talk about the nuclear deal, but before we get to that, you touched on the fact that you felt this was a threat to the region. But there are conversations out there around the fact that Israel itself has nuclear weapons. Is there any truth to this? And if Israel does have its own nuclear weapons and has nuclear ambitions, what makes the nuclear ambitions of Iran a threat to the Middle East?
As far as I'm aware, Iran is the only country in the world that only threats to annihilate another country. When you have a country that threatens to annihilate another country, you cannot allow them to have a nuclear weapon. That, I think, is very, very clear. We've seen Iran's aggression. We've seen their aggression with Hezbollah. We've seen their aggression in Syria. We've seen their aggression in Yemen. We've seen their aggression in Iraq. We've seen their aggression with Hamas. And if you were to allow a regime that only threatens to annihilate another country, the nuclear weapon, and a country that is destabilizing the entire Middle East and give them a nuclear weapon, it would be catastrophic, it would be a disaster. And there is no country in the world that wants to see Iran obtain a nuclear weapon. And therefore, we acted in order to prevent that from happening, in order to prevent an imminent threat, an existential threat to the very existence of the State of Israel.
So let's get this clear. The reason why Iran's nuclear weapon ambitions is a threat is because they have threatened to annihilate another country. But Israel itself has nuclear weapons. Isn't Israel in any way a threat as well? Because there are people who would say that Israel is trying to annihilate Palestine. So isn't that a threat in itself? Help us understand this dynamic. Why their nuclear ambitions is a problem, but Israel having nuclear weapons is not.
Well, Israel's never, ever admitted to having nuclear weapons. I've seen some of the claims, but I certainly have no knowledge of Israel having nuclear weapons. And Israel's policy is that we will not be the first country to introduce nuclear weapons to the Middle East. But the issue here is, as you said, Iran is a threat to other countries. Israel is not. Israel, in our Declaration of Independence, and every prime minister and every leader that we've had since our independence in 1948 has been very clear. Our hand is outstretched in peace to our neighbors. We want peace with our neighbors. We want to live side by side with our neighbors. So
let's talk about an Iranian nuclear deal. This is something that was in the works. We saw the meetings in Rome, in Oman, and like we said earlier, 5 engagements altogether. So some nuclear deal can be signed, and we see the United States in the middle with Oman acting as intermediary in these talks. What are your thoughts on a proper nuclear deal that the United States is trying to broker? What are the thoughts of the Israeli government on that?
Well, we saw that the Iranians were not serious about entering into negotiations. President Trump said the Iranians were not serious. It was clear they were playing for time. We had intelligence information that Iran was using those negotiations in order to move towards developing a nuclear weapon and was not serious about in any way entering into a nuclear deal. We've seen that for a number of year on year, that Iran has been moving towards nuclear weapons whilst pretending to be in negotiations. Iran made very clear they would never give up the right to enrich uranium. They carried on building a ballistic missile program. So these negotiations were not serious. They were not in any way going to lead anywhere. President Trump himself said to the Iranians, you have 60 days. I want to see serious commitment within those 60 days. There was no movement within the 60 days, and Israel took its action on day 61 after Iran had been given ample opportunity to move forward and show its commitment. But Iran kept saying, we want to enrich uranium, we want a missile program, we want to keep moving forward, and they carried on threatening Israel. So if now there can be a deal, and in that deal, Iran is not allowed to have any form of nuclear enrichment.
To get your thoughts on that outburst by President Donald Trump on his way to that NATO summit, where he was angry. He felt like, look, I came up here, did what I could to secure a ceasefire between these two parties, but it seems like they've been at war for so long that they don't even know what peace looks like. They don't know what they're doing. And he used some words there. What are your thoughts on that? And is that something that maybe will push Israel to stick to this ceasefire and how this ceasefire is supposed to work in the first place?
Well, the ceasefire was meant to be put in motion, and we saw that Iran breached it. Iran breached it by firing missiles at Israel, at Israeli civilian populations. Iranian missiles during this conflict were all fired at Israeli civilian populations. Israel targeted the Iranian nuclear and ballistic missile capabilities. Iran targeted our civilians. There was a huge difference in the way that this operation and this conflict carried out. But President Trump was understandably frustrated that Iran wasn't sticking to the ceasefire. And he referred to, before 1979, before the Iranian Revolution, Israel and Iran had very, very good relations. There were direct El Al flights between Tel Aviv and Tehran. We had fantastic relations between the two countries, and we hope that one day we'll be able to go back to that. This Iranian regime is not only a threat to Israel, but it's a threat to its own people. We've seen it punishes women for uncovering their hair. It blinds women for not listening to their regime. It oppresses its people. It's one of the most oppressive regimes in the entire world.
We'll go on a short break right now, but when we come back, we'll be talking about what peace means in this particular conflict between Israel and Iran. Please stay with us. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching Hard Copy right here on Channels Television, and the Israeli ambassador to Nigeria, Ambassador Michael Freeman, joins us via Zoom for this very crucial conversation. When the 12-day war was announced, and it was called Rising Lion, is that reference to the fact that the Iranian flag before the revolution was actually the lion with the rising sun behind it, before this new flag that has, the swords in between it? Is that when you say you want to go back to the relationship with Iran, before the 1979 revolution rather, but the people have chosen what kind of government they want. How does Israel intend to build a relationship with something that's gone? Because it doesn't feel like that lion with the rising sun behind it is going to come back anytime soon.
Well, the Iranian people haven't chosen their leadership, and it's very important that we understand that. There's not been an election in Iran. There's been no election there since 1979 whatsoever. The Iranian regime is a dictatorial and a brutal dictatorial regime. Protest against the regime is not allowed in any way whatsoever. If you protest, you are shot, you are imprisoned, you are hung in public. This is a vicious regime that punishes its own citizens, that does not allow women freedom. We're having this interview. In Iran, you wouldn't be allowed to do this interview, not without a man checking that everything's okay, not without you being completely covered up, not without you being able to only hold the Iranian regime's lines, because that's what the dictatorial regime is. So it's not for me to be choosing what the Iranian people want. But I think we need to be very clear. The Iranian people have not had a say in their government. The Iranian people are oppressed by their leadership, and the leadership is a dictatorial one that is one that I think the world would be a better place without it, but it's not for us to be involved in that.
All right, let's come back to the ceasefire. In your view, did Iran break the ceasefire first, or was it Israel?
There's no question Iran broke the ceasefire. We had a deadline. As soon as that deadline came into power and went into force, and we announced that the ceasefire was in place, and President Trump announced the ceasefire was in place, Iran launched a missile after that. So once Iran launched a missile, I don't think there's really any question about whether or not Iran breached the ceasefire. They did so by launching a ballistic missile on the north of Israel and our civilian population. We are very fortunate that missile was knocked out of the sky by our defense system, because had it have landed and had it have killed civilians, then I think we would have been in a very different place.
Did Israel retaliate?
Well, Israel had a very limited retaliation. We had a bigger one, but at the request of President Trump, according to media reports, we had a smaller retaliation. But we've been very clear, any breach of the ceasefire agreement will be responded to forcefully. That needs to be how everybody understands this. there is a ceasefire, but if Iran breaches it, if Iran rebuilds its nuclear program, if Iran rebuilds its ballistic missile program, if Iran attacks Israel, then Israel will react in order to look after, in order to safeguard the Jewish people and the state of Israel.
I'm going to ask you as we wrap up, the same question I asked you as we were wrapping up the last time you were here live in this studio. What is peace? What does peace look like when it comes to this conflict with Iran? A ceasefire is in place. Everyone is sheathing their swords right now. But what does lasting peace mean? What does it look like? What modalities have to be in place for Israel to accept that we are now at peace with Iran?
I think that that's a simple question, actually. It was a simple answer. Iran needs to not seek the destruction and the annihilation of the state of Israel. Iran needs to agree to live in peace with Israel. We have no dispute with the Iranian people. We have no dispute with the great history, as you said, of Iran. Iran and the Jewish people have a fantastic, fantastic relationship. You know, my mother-in-law, my wife's mother's family is from Iran. The Jewish people have a fantastic relationship and history in Iran, and we'd love to see that again. So when Iran stops calling for the destruction of the state of Israel, when Iran stops moving towards annihilating the state of Israel, when Iran stops backing terror organizations around the world that are looking to attack and destroy Israel, then I believe there can be peace, and that peace will be wonderful. It will go back to the days of old, and it can be huge, huge benefits for the Iranian people and for Israel and for the Jewish people around the world, because there is no reason for us to be in conflict whatsoever with Iran.
When you hear from the Kremlin at the time when this crisis started, and you heard the support from Vladimir Putin for the Iranian people, just to get your thoughts on that support from someone who, you know, many people have been looking at over the years for the sort of government he runs and the kind of support he gives to particular governments. Is that something that worries the Israeli government, the fact that Vladimir Putin has basically said we stand with Iran come what may?
Well, we've seen over the last couple of years that Iran has been providing to Russia these suicide drones and missiles that they've been using on the Ukrainian people. So it's not a surprise to see Russia standing with Iran when Iran's been arming Russia to carry out some terrible atrocities on the Ukrainian people, has been supplying them with missiles and with drones. We disagree with President Putin on this. We think that Iran is a dictatorial regime. It's a regime that has no legitimacy. It's a regime that is threatening to annihilate Israel. And on this issue, we believe that, that President Putin was wrong.
When you hear other governments around the world, you know, it is the same thing, basically the same kind of communication, really, maybe a little different because of Iran and its history. But you hear the human rights angle of things coming up. Oh, it looks like Israel is antagonizing the region again. You know, and they bring up these human rights conversations. Of course, protests will erupt around the world where people are accusing Israel of being the antagonist in this particular situation. What do you need governments of the world to understand? Because we see statements all the time saying we want a cessation of this war, and we don't want any more human rights abuses. We don't want any more people being attacked for whatever reason. And in many ways, some people look at Israel as the person who is doing the antagonizing. What do you need the nations of the world to understand about this situation, and how are they getting it wrong in your view?
Well, I think that most of the leaders around the world understand exactly what Israel did and understand exactly why Israel did it. If we're talking about the human rights organizations, I would say to them, if you want to protest, why don't you protest for the Iranian people? The Iranian people that are beaten, the Iranian people that are in prison, the Iranian people that have their eyes cut out for protesting, the women who were murdered, the hundreds of women who were murdered for the right not to wear a hijab if they don't want to. Why aren't you protesting for them? And as for the countries around the world and the government, I think that we should echo what the German Chancellor said when he said very clearly, Israel is doing the dirty work of the West. Israel is doing the work that the rest of the world wanted to be done. That is to stop Iran's nuclear weapons program. Iran's nuclear weapons program is not only a threat to Israel, it's a threat to Europe, it's a threat to America, it's a threat to Africa. We know that Iran works to destabilize Africa. We know that Iran is back destabilizing groups, even in Nigeria. And therefore, we've done the world a service by stopping that destabilization, by stopping Iran getting nuclear weapons, which we don't know where they'd have passed them to, who they'd have given them to, how they'd have used it. And therefore, I think that most countries around the world understand what Israel did. We know that most countries around the world are grateful for what Israel did, despite what they may say in public, some of them. All of them understand that the world today is a much safer place because of the active actions that Israel took, a much safer place.
I was going to wrap up, but you brought up something just now, and I want to be able to get what you mean by that. In what way is Iran a threat to Nigeria?
Well, we know that Iran sponsors various different groups and is behind various different groups, not only in Nigeria, but in West Africa. We've seen Iranian attempts to infiltrate into areas. We know that Iran is involved in various different groups within Nigeria. Wherever Iran acts, there is destabilization, there is a growth in terror, there is a growth in threats to the population, and it's something that we need to be very considerate of, very wary of, and something that people should be careful of.
Well, Ambassador Michael Freeman, I guess that would be a nice place to end today's conversation. I want to thank you very much, Ambassador, for being with us on Hard Copy, and good luck with all the work you have ahead of you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
That's Hard Copy this week. I'm Kayla Megwa. Good night.